So a quick question before we get started. How many people in this room have used an online dating service of some kind? Hands up. Don't be shy. Okay, so about 5 people by the number of hands that went up, which is clearly somewhat misleading. By my estimation, probably about half the people in this room are single in some shape or form, and over 50% of that half will have used an online dating service. So probably between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 people in this room have used an online dating service, even though only 5 people actually put their hand up. So I want to share some of the insights today on our journey in going international. A little bit first, though, in terms of who eHarmony are. We were founded in 2000 by a 65-year-old clinical psychologist, Dr. Neil Clark Warren. He'd actually been a marriage counselor for 30 years prior to that. And he basically came to the conclusion that there must be a better way for bringing people together so that they end up in happier relationships, in relationships which last for longer. And eHarmony was basically born out of that. And at the time, it was really a pioneering brand. It did things very, very different, and it radically changed the category, a category which then in 2000 was frankly pretty seedy and consisted mostly of banner ads of pictures of women in bikinis and so forth. And then eHarmony came in, and we really changed that. The business model, it's a subscription service. We do over $200 million globally in revenue on an annual basis. And we are very different. We specifically match individuals to other individuals. So you can't sign up in a couple of minutes and quickly search the photos of the pretty boys or the pretty girls. We ask you to take a questionnaire, and then we drip feed you people who we believe are very suited to your personality, to your psychology, to your way of being. In terms of our international footprint, we really embarked on our international journey about 3 years ago. First with the UK, rapidly followed by Australia, and then more recently into Brazil, and now Japan. At the same time, we also have embarked on a strategic partnership and an investment with a company called eDarling, and they are our continental European strategy. They're in 11 countries across Europe, and I'll say a little bit more about why we did that in a second. And it's the classic US tech company model. So you do development, technology, back-end support functions in the US at headquarters, and in market, it's distribution, local marketing, business development, PR, and so forth. And so we have offices in all the countries in which we are organic, but they're relatively small offices, really focused on local distribution. Our competitors in this space, you're probably familiar with some of the names. The biggest one everywhere in the world is Match/Meetic in Europe. We also compete in a lot of markets in Europe with Parship and Alita Partner, who do a very similar thing to what eHarmony does. Until a few years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, really the dating space was dominated by these big players. But what we've seen recently is an increasing fragmentation of the space, a lot of social, a lot of mobile players coming into it, and that's really changed the landscape quite a lot. And I think what you'll find is that not quite right now, but in 2 or 3 years' time, the dating experience from a consumer perspective will be very, very different to what it is now. So, going global. You want to go to other markets, how do you start? The most obvious starting place is really which countries. How do you choose which markets to go to when? And then the next question is how. Why did eHarmony choose the markets that we're in organically versus those that we took a minority investment in? The first thing is we went to the easiest markets first. UK, Australia, English language, Do the simple countries first. Don't go to Brazil first. Brazil is really for the experienced international internet company. The challenges faced there from everything from the local bureaucracy, tax, payment methods, evolution of the market. I would strongly recommend that you do not go to Brazil first, but it is obviously a very significant and fast-growing market. And then it's really about which markets actually have scale. When you apply all the filters that you need for your business in terms of market size of e-commerce market, internet penetration, size of online advertising market, how many countries are there actually left? And it's whittled down quite quickly. We took the view that India and China we simply could not do organically ourselves. It would have to be an M&A play. And you know what? Given our size and where we're at, it's probably one for a few years down the line. And then, so that basically left Brazil in Latin America, which is still by far the largest market there, even if you add up all the other Latin American countries and put them together versus Brazil. And then really Japan in Asia as the two obvious other plays beyond Europe. So why didn't we do Europe organically? Well, we're an American company, and one thing American companies are not very good at, as opposed to European companies, is internationalizing their product, localizing it, even doing basic things like translation and so forth. If we had gone organically, we'd probably be on country number 2 or 3 in continental Europe, if I'm honest. We'd have got to France, then about 9 months later we'd have got to Germany, and then maybe Spain, and so on. Instead, we took a minority investment in eDarling with an option to buy the rest at a later date. And those guys have executed phenomenally. They've rolled out into 11 countries. They bring expertise and execution know-how in continental Europe that we just simply didn't have as a company. It was not in our DNA. There are obviously some advantages and disadvantages to the different entry strategies. Being frank, the minority investment in continental Europe has worked very well for us. It de-risks it. It gives us a degree of certainty about the value that we will be acquiring at a later date. But there are drawbacks. You give up a certain amount of control, and we really have not that much say in how the company is being built. And we realize that there will be a challenge when we bring the two together, and we're trying to mitigate that. We work very closely with the guys at eDarling, but it is a challenge. If you do a market organically, I would ask yourself the question, do you have all the necessary things to make that market a success? And predominantly, it's about how confident are you of hiring the right people, because if you don't hire the right people, that can set you back a long time in a market. It can delay it indefinitely. How confident are you in your distribution channels in that market? Will they work in the same way? Are they as open in the markets that you're hoping to go in as the markets you're in currently? And then just how quickly do you think you can execute versus other competitors that are already in that market or who might enter that market as well? I think these are different aspects to consider. The final option is potentially doing a joint venture. We looked at it in certain markets. The challenge that we've always had is when you do it on a single market, how big really is the business that you're talking about? Once you split it into and you start factoring in all the complexity of working together, the fact that you give up control and so forth, it makes it a real challenge to do. But there is granted obvious benefits, in particular in markets like Japan or very complex markets where the beta of outcome is really very high, and you don't have that degree of certainty that you might do in other markets. The final couple of points that I would say on this is just be very aware when you enter other markets beyond your home country. You're creating a global culture, you're creating a global company, and the level of complexity will go up exponentially from what you're used to. If you think it's going to be hard, multiply that by 3 or 5x. And realize also that you need to invest, you need to take the time, put the resources in really creating that global culture, that global organization, because if you don't, you'll end up with something which is very, very fragile on the periphery and which will likely come back and just crumble. So make sure that everyone internally, both CEO, CFO, whomever is running international, as well as external parties, your board, are all aligned on what you're really trying to do with your international strategy, with your expansion strategy. Because the road is long, the road is tricky, it will be very unexpected, and you need to make sure that everyone is committed and in it for the long haul. So there are a lot of lessons that we've learned going into the different markets, and I'm not going to go through all the different things that we've learned in each market, but just a few general guiding principles along the way. The debate that always exists is, can we just have a global approach? Can we just roll out the same thing in every market? Or are we going to have to go country by country and really figure it out, and how different is it going to be, and so forth? The answer is that there isn't really a one-size-fits-all rule to this. You need to be pragmatic, you need to have a flexible approach. But what I would say is that you can over-egg the localization thing. And by localization, I don't mean just internationalizing your product, i.e. translating it, making it ready for a new market, rolling it out. Really, localization, I mean adapting the features, creating something which is actually significantly different. And in our experience, that happens very rarely. Sure, there are a few markets, Japan again, or other Asian markets where that might be necessary, but otherwise, I've rarely seen it be really that necessary. Nowadays, everyone is used to big international online brands, and people are very adaptable in the online world. And if someone comes to you and says, we need to rename a product for this market, please ignore them. Unless your product means something absolutely, the name of your brand means something absolutely horrible in that market, then just keep the same name. It really is not worth the headache or the hassle. The other thing I would say is filter the noise. As soon as you put people in local markets, they'll create a lot of noise. They'll say, oh, but we're really different, Brazil, it's just a completely different kettle of fish, etc. We can't do things this way. That won't work. That piece of marketing just will fail. Yes, they're right up to a point, but take it with a pinch of salt and just test those hypotheses. Test the conventional wisdom. Because more often than not, you may find that actually it doesn't hold anymore. And I would say if there's one thing that we have learned at eHarmony, it is that. It is test the conventional wisdom about the market. When we entered the UK, we were told, eHarmony's not going to work in the UK. You guys shouldn't even bother trying. You're about marriage, you're about love, you're all schmaltzy. British people are cynical. They're going to look at that and just reject you outright. And to be honest, when I sat in a focus group after just joining the company, and I listened to British singles, their opinions of the product, not so much the product, but just our American commercials, it was literally, their reaction was, please pass me the sick bucket, and they wanted to run out of the room. I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And so what we did is we went, well, okay, this is what people say in a focus group, but maybe it's actually very different when they're at home alone, because it's a very personal decision going on an online dating site. And so, as was evidenced by the fact that apparently only 5 people in this room have ever tried online dating. So we took our creative and we developed 2 versions for radio, the quickest way of getting into offline marketing, which is very important for our category. And we did 2 things. We created an American-style creative, just all about the brand and love and marriage, and we created a witty, funny ad. And you know what? The American-style ad was 3x more effective than the British funny ad. And that was a huge, huge learning and eye-opener. And from that moment, it enabled us to, we got a lot of confidence. We quickly did UK versions of our American creative, and we're then able to scale the business, the product in the UK very fast. So as I said, test conventional wisdom, because it is often not what you think. Thank you.